Welcome to Carnivore Theology, a podcast that answers questions about the Christian faith to help you grow from milk to meat, to grow into a wise, skilled, world-changing follower of Jesus Christ. With theologian and pastor Chad Graham, author and pastor Al Dejanot, and your host, Steve Bastian.
This is part 2 of Carnivore Theology's two-part series on the state of abortion with special guest Mike Shouten of WeNeedaLAW.ca's.
Well, that kind of boggles my mind, because the other side of the pro-life argument doesn't make any sense to me. Out of the same mouth, they'll say if they want the child, then it's a baby worth protecting and celebrating. Let's have a baby shower, and it's wonderful. And then if they don't want it, somehow it's just a blob of tissue they can dispose of as they wish. Now, I can't process that kind of thinking. I was listening to a Focus on the Family broadcast about abortion, and they broke down the arguments for the pro-choice group by using this idea of location, age, and intelligence. Location was, I don't change into a different being or lose my status as a human being based on my location. So why would a baby be less of a person just because they're located inside of a womb? So your location doesn't bear on whether or not you're human. Or age. A newborn baby has just as many rights, even in Canada, as a 30-year-old, as a 100-year-old. So obviously we as a society don't believe that people are worth more or less based on their age. And intelligence, we certainly don't believe that a person in grade 1 is less of a human being than a person with a doctorate. In Canada, we believe that a person with a physical or developmental disability is worth being in our society. It's worth our respect, worth our protection, right? We bend over backwards to make ramps and special education classes for these people. So therefore, we clearly don't believe that a person with greater intelligence has greater worth. So why would a preborn baby be of less worth? Like, can you give me some kind of insight into the logic behind what these people are thinking, and how you don't go crazy when thinking about it and talking to these people? Is there even a way to successfully argue that fetuses are actually human beings to these folks who don't seem to have a basis in logic?
So you speak to the core of the problem here, and that is education. How do we educate the Canadian public to the point where not only they're going to recognize and believe that an unborn child is a human being based on science and logic, because you can't argue that. So that's one area. But then the other one is how to get them to get past where I think really we've been deceived. Like, we have been deceived by the women's rights movement into thinking that in order for women to have equality, they have to have unequivocal access to abortion at any stage of the pregnancy for any reason whatsoever. And we've been duped into thinking that. And that's why it's so politically, it's so paralyzing when you bring up this topic, because that's the framework that you're starting it in. People are like, you question abortion, that means you're questioning women's rights and you want to put them back in back alleys and barefoot pregnant in the kitchen. Like, it's absolutely
like, it is that
ridiculous.
fast, right? That's what you're talking about. As soon as you bring up and say anything pro-life, you're immediately saying anti-women. Like, they're almost equated, right? They're even the same argument.
It's a clash of rights in our society.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's how it's seen. And there are some, not many, but some extreme abortion advocates who will say, like, as soon as you grant any right to life to a preborn child, even if from 30 weeks onward, then all of a sudden there's a tension in there that they can't reconcile that, and they think the end of the world is coming. So we more and more in the education and in when we have debates on the streets and conversations with people, etc., is we base it just strictly on a human rights argument. Like, do you believe in human rights? Absolutely, everybody believes in human rights. We bring in the science a little bit, but nobody wants to argue it because they know that you're right. They know that you can't argue with the science, right? So, and then we compare it. Then we compare it to other examples in history when some people were deemed to be non-persons and not, their human rights weren't protected, in order for incredible and egregious evils to be perpetrated against them. And then you see a lot of light bulbs go on.
Do you really? Tell me a good story. Tell me something. Because honestly, like, I look back at the Super Bowl, okay? The Super Bowl had this commercial where there was a Doritos commercial, and there was a mother that was getting an ultrasound of her preborn baby, and the dad had this bag of Doritos, and of course that's what dads do, eat Doritos during the... Exactly, right? And so as he moved the Dorito, the baby was following it around, and the mom gets upset, grabs the Dorito, throws it on the floor, after which, hilariously, the baby shoots off the screen, presumably delivering itself to get the Dorito. And the pro-choice side freaked out because they were up in arms that the ad was actually saying it was wrong to humanize fetuses. They thought you can't humanize first off, how do you humanize a human being, right? Tell me something. Tell me that there's some good news here, because if people are that lost that a Doritos commercial with an ultrasound gets them so hot that they have to argue that we're being anti-women, anti-choice, and humanizing a human being, there's got to be something out there, because I'm going nuts and making me crazy.
It drove the other side crazy. It shouldn't drive us crazy. It should just make us laugh. It's actually quite
mocking.
comical when you see them, when you see them react to
awesome.
that. But keep in mind, so the context here is the United States. In the United States, they have made incredible progress by introducing and passing laws that mandate ultrasounds. So a woman comes in and requests an abortion. The doctor or the technician says, you can have an abortion tomorrow when you come back. And before that, we're going to do an ultrasound so you see your child. And it's incredible how many women then decide not to have the abortion. There's even actually mobile ultrasound clinics. It's called Save the Storks. If you Google that, Save the Storks. There's people with mobile ultrasound vans driving back and forth in front of Planned Parenthood clinics, because they know that if those women come in there and see that their child is a human, it's not just a blob of tissue or a clump of cells that so many people have told them, that they will decide for another option other than abortion.
That was actually something really ironic, was the fact that there was another Super Bowl commercial where they celebrated people that were conceived as a result of a Super Bowl win, right? And these guys were standing out there going, I'm a Super Bowl baby. And I'm like, look, they're people. What's wrong with you?
Drive from the right of football.
But I think that your listeners can, and for us as an advocacy organization, we there's innumerable opportunities to get depressed and just quit, throw in the towel. Like, what is the point of this? Where are we going? Like, nothing's changing. But when we look for those small successes and we see that people are willing to take small steps in order to save some, and then continue working to save more, encouraging. So we look down to the U.S. and we see whether it's mandatory waiting periods, ultrasounds, parental consent laws. Do you know that in Canada, we don't even have a law that mandates parental consent? I have 2 teenage daughters, and they can't even get a piercing in their cartilage or a tattoo without us consenting. But if their boyfriend would knock them up, he could convince them that abortion is the only option, drive them to the clinic, have an abortion. We would have no knowledge whatsoever.
And you had an excellent commercial about this on your YouTube channel. I really liked that commercial where the little girl gets her tattoo, and then the little girl wants to go climbing, and she has to have her mother there for all these permission forms. Yeah. And then at the end, she walks into an abortion clinic, and the mom just disappears.
Yeah. And we're trying to juxtapose these things against each other so that people start to see it, right? Because it makes sense in the average Canadian's mind. So this again points to how important it is that we understand politics and understand where the Canadian public are at. So currently in our country, and for decades now, there's been a very small minority of abortion extremists that want abortion on demand for any or no reason. Polls show that there's about 8% of Canadians who support that position. They support the status quo. On the other end, you had pro-lifers, people who believe in life from conception onwards. We number in the 5 to 8% as well, very small amount of Canadians. But it's those two groups who are forming the debate. So if you weren't affiliated with either one of those two groups, you found yourselves kind of in that mushy middle. You're uncomfortable with the status quo, but you're not willing to go all the way. You didn't want to enter the conversation. Especially as Canadians, we don't like to offend. We don't want to be offended. We don't like those, divisive conversations. So let's just avoid it altogether.
Yeah, I hate those.
But now we're bringing it right to the middle, right? And we're bringing it to some common sense measures like parental consent, like a law that would ban abortion after 20 weeks, like a law that would say you can't have an abortion if it's only for the reason of the sex of the child. That's blatant discrimination. We're not going to allow that in our country. We even have feminists on side for that. So let's start with some of those measures and then work out from there and see what can be accomplished.
That sounds so common sense to me.
So with what you're saying, if we put that into a very practical take-home perspective, two of us here, we're pastors of local churches, a number of our listeners are. We think of the perspective of what, or from your organization's perspective, what do you see as the average Christian church's role in helping to do this? Because our position is going to be very clear. We believe in life and so on. But we also want to have a positive impact in our society. And we know that not everybody's going to be a Christian and not everybody's going to do the things the way we do. And so as you've said, there's this mushy middle. And I know when I talk to people, they think of the evangelical Christian as a bit of an extremist, a bit out there. So from a church perspective, do you have any suggestions or thoughts about how we can participate in this progress towards incremental change?
Well, the first thing would be to do is visit WeNeedaLAW.ca and click on some of our take action items. We try to meet people where they're at. Like, we recognize everybody's busy. People don't have time to start sitting down and writing long letters to their MPs, filling out petitions and all that kind of stuff. So we make it easy. We have a 3-click easy mail process. You plug in your postal code, hooks you to your MP. We've got numerous letters there, sample letters that you can either edit or just send off as is. So we're trying to make it, and here's what I'm trying to get at. We're trying to make it so that the church, evangelical Christians, Roman Catholics, Protestants, and then out from there, every Canadian can advocate for preborn human rights in a way that allows them to not just say that they're pro-life, but to actually be pro-life.
Yes.
Like, there's a big difference there, right? And we're at that point now where more and more people are realizing that nothing's going to change if you stick your hand up in church and say, yeah, I'm pro-life, and never do anything about it. Like, you need to do something about it, right? I mean, you look at other social reform movements. Look at the civil rights movement. Like, when did it really start going? When people started hitting the streets and doing stuff, right? They got out of their houses and started making a difference. So we can all, even us four, we can sit here and say we're pro-life and lament at the status quo. But if we don't do anything, if we take no concrete action to try to change that, then how can we expect change? Right? So it's the whole faith without works is dead. We need to pray, but we also need to work, right? Ora et labora, that type of thing. We need to get to that step, especially in regards to this injustice. And sometimes I try to, maybe come down too hard on Christians, but I think it's so important that we take the lead on that as Christians, as followers of Jesus Christ, who are called to do good for those, do good for the widow, do good for the orphan, do good for the poor, the less fortunate, etc. We're supposed to exemplify a selfless lifestyle, not a selfish lifestyle. And how better to do that than to stand up for the 300 children that are losing their lives to abortion every year. If every day on the way to work we saw 2 or 3 or 5 on sidewalks, do you think that we'd rise up to this injustice? Absolutely. All Canadians would be outraged. Well, that's what's happening. It just happens to occur behind the closed doors in a sterile clinic for the most part. So these are the things we need to do. And one of the passages, to bring in a Bible passage here, one of the passages that really has impressed that upon me is from Jeremiah 7, where Jeremiah is prophesying about the sacrificing of children at Molech. And as he describes that, using God, speaking for God, he says that there's this phrase there where he says, something that did not even enter my mind. So the people are sacrificing children, what is happening today in Canada, and God says something that did not even enter my mind. And the reason I bring that up is because a common response is, well, there's lots of things going wrong in the world. There's many things we need to address as Christians, and I believe that. We do. But this, I think, is an injustice that is on a different level than many of the other injustices.
Again, just to bring in a bit of a historical perspective, there actually have been lots of times when even our society has been involved in the dehumanizing of various groups of people. We've seen it with Aboriginal peoples. We've seen it with slave trade. It was a bigger cultural thing where we had to move things. Thinking of the slave trade in the U.S., Uncle Tom's Cabin was a subversive novel that came out and began to show people that we were talking about human beings in a way that many had never realized before. And I think until we've made that transition where we can get a broad emotional humanizing appeal, we're not going to have a massive cultural change. And so I'm very much supportive of kind of what you're saying about this incremental work and about being involved in that and about calling people. But it's really hard to motivate people for that, as you said. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing, and certainly I'd want to continue to encourage you in it, and we in our churches will encourage our people to look up your website. If you were to try to impassion the evangelical community, what would your call on us be?
I think I would emphasize some of the things I said earlier, trying to bring people to realize that these are human beings created in the image of God. And every single day, 300 of them are walked to their deaths in a clinic or a hospital around our country. I think I would also bring in the other kind of arm of the pro-life movement, the pastoral arm, and say that we have to acknowledge that when 1 in 4 pregnancies is ending in abortion in our country, there is many. First of all, that means that not only 100,000 babies lose their lives, that means 100,000 women are hurting because they've had an abortion. 100,000 men, most likely, boyfriends or husbands, also know about this, as well as numerous other family members. So there is literally hundreds of thousands of people that are affected by this. And they're also affected by it in the church. And to start with that, let's say there's going to be people in this room today that have been affected by abortion. Know that the church, is the place where reconciliation can occur and can happen, that there is forgiveness in Jesus Christ. And then move on from that and ask yourselves whether or not God is calling you to help make a difference so that somebody else will know what abortion is going to do to their preborn child before they make that decision.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different topic, and that's something that I think we always need to be aware of, is as much as children are obviously the victims here, mothers are victims too. And there are many cases where the fathers have no say in what's happening, and they go through a loss. There are many cases where young women are pressured, really against their will, to conform to a boyfriend's demand or a parent's demand or a societal demand. And there are very many hurting people in the world. And so appreciate that note that if we take only an adversarial stance to the process, we're ignoring a lot of the victims of the process.
Can I ask one more question, though, about this? Just could you help us out? So say we are in a church, or we do have, we know people that are in crisis pregnancy.
Yeah.
What are the Canadian alternatives to abortion? Like, are there practical alternatives in Canada that exist right now? Because it seems to me that the default for crisis pregnancy is abortion rather than any other option, whether it be adoption or going to get help from a church or anything like that. So what are the practical alternatives in Canada?
So there's a number of them, obviously, and I'm sure that you can readily come up with them. One is having the child. The other one is giving up the child for adoption. But allow me to share with you a story from our own life, our own family. So as you know, we work and our family is very involved in the political arm of the pro-life movement. We had an opportunity this summer to be involved in the pastoral arm. And this occurred when a 14-year-old Indo-Canadian girl who was 30 weeks pregnant walked into what's called the Hope for Women Center in Abbotsford, the town next to ours here in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia. And she didn't know what to do. She was scared to live at home because of what her dad might do when he or if he found out that she was pregnant. She didn't want the baby. This was a mistake. She regretted it, etc. She walked into the right place with her social worker. They called us up and said, look, this is a situation. We need a safe home for this girl for 2 months so that she can deliver this baby. We can give this baby up for adoption and she can go back to her house. And so that's what happened. She went, according to many members of her family, went to a summer camp in another part of the country and came back after 2 months. But in the meantime, she had, with our family and mostly with my wife, who helped her with the labor and delivery, etc., delivered a beautiful baby girl. 2 days later, she gave that baby girl to an adoptive family who is now blessed, and they are parents to her. And she's 14 years old, back in school. Life continues to go on. This is part of her story. But the message is that when you become pregnant at an age when you don't want to be, or this is not something you can handle at the time, you don't have to kill your baby in order to have a normal life. In fact, her life is going to be much more normal now. But when God willing, she gets married at some age, at 25 or something, and her and her husband decide to have kids, she will reflect on her positive birthing experience, her positive experience with her child. And she doesn't have the guilt that she has blood on her hands because she was involved in the killing of her child. So this is an example of what can happen. And it was God telling us that, you know what, you can advocate all you want for laws that protect children in the womb, but it doesn't matter if abortion is illegal right from conception onwards. There's still going to be women who don't want to be pregnant, who don't want this child. So then the church is going to have to step up for sure and take care of these women in ways like this. So that's just an answer to what can we do. Like, there are other options, and it was beautiful to be involved in an experience where all the mechanisms are in place. It just went seamless, this whole process, the adoption process. There's thousands of families who want to adopt newborns. It was beautiful, and all glory to God for what happened.
Thank you for that story. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. The other thing that I always bring up, like, we have obviously many different audiences that we speak to, so different talks for different audiences, etc. But if I'm ever presenting in a church or to Christians, I always reference Proverbs 24. And if you will, I'll just read a couple of verses from there, and you'll quickly understand why. Proverbs 24:11, rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those staggering towards slaughter. If you say, but we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? Will he not repay each person according to what he has done? So this is our obligation now, especially as church. We know this injustice is happening in Canada. If we decide to turn our heads and say, I have to work those few extra hours because we need to spend time at the cottage in the summer, and you say, I couldn't do anything. Sorry, God. Does not he who weighs the heart perceive it, and will he not repay each according to what they have done? That's pretty powerful commission from God to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that encouragement.
Great.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's I'm really glad that we went on this little walk together, and you're able to share a little bit more about what you do and what your passion is.
But I miss the snow. Where's all the snow?
Well, you don't like the flowers and the green grass.
Too much with the flowers and the green grass and the birds.
Remember, Al is from Ottawa.
Yeah. We're currently enjoying 50 centimeters of snow in Ottawa, and I just miss it so much. I think I want to go back. So perhaps it's time for us to close out and for me to go home.
To find out more about carnivore theology, or if you've got any topics or questions you'd like us to cover on upcoming episodes, let us know by visiting our website, www.carnivoretheology.com. You can also leave a message on our SpeakPipe page. That's at www.speakpipe.com/carnivore theology. If you like what we're doing, please share with your church and friends. Like us on Facebook, rate and subscribe to us on iTunes, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. We encourage you to connect with your local biblical church and keep your eyes on the cross.
We're recording, Steve.
Okay.
This is pre-recording information.
Now
I was going to have to spend an extra 5 minutes editing thanks to you.
It's terrible.
His wife is going to be upset with him, and it's all your fault.
50, 52 seconds, 53 seconds.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. I will read the intro and then we'll get right into it. I'm going to
What else are you going to do? I'm going to breathe.
Well, Al, run it through the computer.
Should we tabulate it? Okay, run it through the computer. Boop, boop, beep, boop, boop, beep, boop.
The sound effect is better in the final edition.
Not that much better, though, actually.
Any questions is valid. If we deviate from the script, I hope you're okay too.
I've never once deviated from the script in the entire history of carnivore theology. Not ever.
First for everything.
yeah,
It's good.
Al doesn't do well with rules.